Monster presents Heard on Thursdays, the iconic radio talk show that made Philippine FM radio talk. Winner of multiple KBP Golden Dove Awards. HOT. Heard on Thursdays. Your host, Rhea Rams.
Hello, Monsters. Good afternoon, and welcome to the show that made Philippine FM radio talk, KBP's best podcast program, Heard on Thursdays right here on Manila's hottest Monster RX93.1. I'm your host, Rhea Rams, and today we are talking about art. Now, art isn't something that we just look at. It's something we inherit, we interpret, we keep alive. But what happens when the art of our time starts to fade? Not because of neglect, but because of the very materials that make it modern. In today's world, artists work with everything from cigarettes to plastic to film and even performance, materials that were never meant to last forever. Conserving these works isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about asking the deeper questions. What do we preserve? What do we let go of? And how do we honor the artist's intent while accepting that change is part of the process? Our guest today knows all about that very intimately. Catherine Campos is a contemporary art conservator who recently completed her master's in conservation of contemporary art and media at UCL in London. She's worked with the National Galleries of Scotland and now serves as the events officer for the Institute of Conservation's Contemporary Art Group. Today, we are going to be talking about what it really takes to keep modern and experimental art alive, from preserving delicate materials to understanding the ethics of restoration, and why conservation is about more than just preservation. It's about honoring meaning, memory, and change. Heard on Thursdays. Let's welcome to the show, Catherine Campos.
Hi.
Catherine, welcome to the show. We are so happy to have you here. You have worked in conservation, curatorial work, even teaching.
Yeah.
But for those tuning in, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more and tell us what a contemporary art conservator really does.
Okay. Hi, I'm Catherine. I just finished, as Rhea said, my Master's of Science in Conservation. And I used to be a professor at UP Diliman teaching art history, and that's kind of how I got onto this path of working with more objects. Contemporary art conservation is fun because when you think of what contemporary art period is, it's just so many things. It's music, it's film, it's performance, it's sculptures, it's paintings, it's everything and anything that is somewhat modern. Mm-hmm. So with all these challenges comes with a lot of fun problem solving, and that's why I really love the field. Oh,
that's so interesting because back in the day, I feel like art was mostly, the traditional means, painting. So how we'd see videos even online, like people trying to preserve and restore oil paintings. Normally that's what they do, right?
Yeah.
And then there's also sculptures. It's pretty much that.
It's been that for a long time. So I'm actually from the first batch of this new field. Mm-hmm. So you can't really find this anywhere else in the world. I am one of the first people with this degree. And yeah, art for the longest time was paintings and it was sculpture. So during the pandemic, we saw all these videos on YouTube of people removing like all the yellowed paint and varnish from works. And that's what people think when I say I do art conservation, but I do everything and anything, honestly. I don't work with paintings as much as I work with everything else under the sun.
Right. So like I mentioned earlier, sometimes you worked with cigarettes, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on because your dissertation was actually on that.
Yes.
And there's also like the matter of live performances. I mean, how do you preserve that? Is it just through film? Well, we are going to get into that, but you have worked on some fascinating pieces, everything from sculptures made with cigarettes to digital and performance art. Can you share how you found your way into this very, very unique field? Like, was there a specific artwork or moment that made you realize that this was your calling?
I think just going to art school, going to UP and having to go to all these galleries and these museums and seeing the state that a lot of our work was in was a bit discouraging and disheartening because I had also seen museums abroad and seen how the display cases are, and so much of conservation is preventative and making sure the artwork lives in a good and safe environment. So to see the artworks in our museums not at the same level, I think really gave me a big push to want to bring this back to the Philippines, to bring this expertise here. And hopefully that's the plan one day.
Oh, I love that. Now, you have worked in some incredible institutions also, the National Galleries of Scotland, the V&A, UCL. So what has it been like stepping into those spaces as a Filipino conservator? Like, you're bringing your own perspective and experience into such a global field.
Yeah, I think that was fun. So in my course, we had our experts, which are our professors. They came from all different museums. So we did one day where we went to the Tate, and they were talking about this artwork. It's called Cloud Canyons. It's a series of bubble machines. It's by the Filipino artist David Medallia.
Oh, wow.
And the artists and the conservators were talking about how hard it was for them to conserve the bubbles because they'd never seen it in real life while David was still alive. I, from the very back row, go, oh no, I saw it, because it was an art fair like a couple of years ago that I went to as a student.
Nice.
And I think because Filipino art is not as international as I'd like it to be, we're not yet getting the recognition that I think we deserve. So I give a perspective of someone who's seen a lot of the artworks, and I get to talk to the conservators about what it was like when it was made. And I also bring some awareness that, hey, you have all this technology here, but how do we do conservation somewhere that we don't have all this equipment?
Ooh.
So we have to come up with some solutions that aren't thousands of pounds to conserve.
Right. Because as much as you'd want to bring that level of expertise here, you have to admit we don't really have the resources, especially in a country where art isn't given as much priority.
Yeah, 100%.
As it should be, especially for such a talented country, right? So that's so interesting, especially the bubble
machine.
Wait,
yeah.
so I have to ask.
Yes.
It was literally bubbles.
It's kind of these plastic tubes that shoot upwards, and then the bubbles stream out in this beautiful, like, almost like solid form. And they were having a hard time reconstructing it in 2004 because they had the motors, but the machine was no longer running, and they had to do all these tests and everything to find a way to get the texture the same way after not actually seeing it in real life. So it was nice to have the conversation about what I saw from the work when it was running.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, before we dive deeper, let's start a little light. What would be the most surprising or unusual material that you've ever had to preserve?
Ooh, okay. The first thing I did when I hopped on my course was we were introduced to this work called Strange Fruit by Zoe Leonard. And it's essentially strange fruit.
Okay, I was like, is it actually fruit?
Yeah, so we had to figure out how the artist and the conservator worked to do it. It was banana peels that were sewn together, and some kind of treatment was done on it that it keeps in its state of decay. Like, the artist wants it to look decayed, but she doesn't want it to, like, completely dissolve. So you have to find a way to get that artwork to stay looking like a shriveled banana peel that's sewn together and not get moldy and not get infected by insects.
What?
Yeah. So lots of big problem solving stuff.
Yeah. How do you even find the proper treatments for that? Like, do you I'm sure you study that, right?
Yeah.
Like what exactly is needed, but it's not one size fits all. It's not the same for everything. So how is it a lot of experimentation?
You're not going to find, if you Google how to treat bananas. Because that's just not the thing people do. But we look at references from how do you treat waterlogged ships. Because it's essentially the same thing. Water has to go in and you have to keep it from leaving. So you're looking at every single field possible and experimenting. You're in the lab all day trying to come up with a solution that's both supported by existing research and also what you think of on the spot.
Wow. Amazing. I mean, you're like an artist, but you're also part scientist, part researcher. You wear many hats here. Now, we are going to get deep into that later on, but right now, Monsters, you are listening to Heard on Thursdays. I'm your host, Ria Rams, and today we are learning about what it takes to keep modern art alive with contemporary art conservator Catherine Campos. We'll be right back after the short break, only here on Manila's hottest Monster RX93.1.
Monster presents Heard on Thursdays, the iconic radio talk show that made Philippine FM radio talk. Winner of multiple KBP Golden Dove Awards. HOT. Heard on Thursdays. Your host, Rhea Rams.
Manila's hottest Monster RX93.1. Welcome back to Heard on Thursdays. I'm your host, Rhea Rams, and we're here with contemporary art conservator Catherine Campos talking about the fascinating world of conserving modern and experimental art. So let's get into the heart of it, okay? Now, when people hear art conservation, like I mentioned earlier, we imagine those old videos or those videos that we saw like early in the pandemic of people stripping down the yellow parts of paintings, people restoring old paintings or classical sculptures. But contemporary art is a whole different game. It's conserving all these modern pieces with all these different types of materials. So how does conserving a modern piece, say like one made with plastic or cigarettes or even video, differ from traditional art conservation?
I think one of the best parts we have about working with contemporary pieces is most of the time the artists are still alive. So you get to have these conversations with the artist about, if this happens, how do you want the artwork to continue to exist? And it's a whole new thing with museums now that you interview the artist about it, so you get this information in advance.
Right.
Because some artists think that if this is destroyed and you conserve it, it's no longer their work. And there's some other artists who say, I want the work to live past me, so do anything you can.
Okay.
So it's kind of a negotiation between you, the artist, and the artwork on how you can best preserve and conserve it.
That's interesting. So you mean to say that there are artists who, for them, once their artwork is destroyed, just leave it destroyed?
Yes.
Okay.
There are artists who think the artwork is an extension of themselves, which, valid, they did make it. And there are artists who thinks that an artwork would have a lifespan for when it's appropriate. And that's how you should keep it. But there are also artists who love a conservator, and artists love working with conservators because we're someone who cares as much as them for their artwork.
Right. And this is like an impeccable agreement. So if the artist says, let it die, there's no way that you should or can rework this artwork.
It's just not ethical. You have to think about contemporary conservation is thinking about the ethics of, is this material good to have in a museum? Is the artist, what's the relationship? How is this coming to us? It's thinking about, we're caring about not only the objects, but the people who are viewing it as
Of
well.
course.
So it's a big ethical field, and I love it.
Okay. Are there any, like you said, you have to think of whether this artwork or the material is good to have in a museum. What would you say is not good to have in a museum?
What would be not good in a museum? I think the UK specifically has had a lot of reckoning with colonization and things like that, and things that are coming from like slave owners and things. Now, there are museums who are returning things. There are museums in the Netherlands returning things, and there are museums that will put plaques saying this is from a sketchy place. And I think it's about acknowledging its past and figuring out if there's still space for it here or if there's somewhere else better for it.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Now, you mentioned before that you worked on some really diverse materials. You mentioned film, metal, and organic materials like cigarettes, even fruit peel.
Yeah.
So could you tell us about a few of the most interesting or challenging works that you've handled?
Okay, I think one of the most interesting works, I wrote it down here, sorry,
Go.
was by John Beagles and Graham Ramsey. It's called Sanguis Gratia Artis, or Black Pudding Self-Portrait. It was a artwork that I installed during my internship at the National Galleries of Scotland. So this is it has multiple parts. So you have the two artists doing the performance during the live opening. And the performance is them cooking these sausages, these blood sausages.
Okay.
Now, on the side, there's a video of how the sausages are being made. And they are medically safely, with the supervision of a nurse, drawing blood from their arms to make blood sausage, which is like morcilla, out of their blood. And that's their self-portrait. And then on the side, there's photos and documentation. So my job for this would be documenting the performance as it happens. There's a very long documentation sheet for this because it is a biohazard, because it's blood.
Right.
Making sure the fridge where the extra sausages are kept is working, because again, it's a biohazard because it's blood. This fridge has a lock, so no one can eat it or do anything with it.
Yeah.
Making sure the artists are safe while they're doing the performance, and also setting up the video aspects, because I do media. So I think that was one of the most controversial works I've ever installed.
No, yeah.
Yeah, you're speechless.
Yeah, I am. Wow. This is like proof of how, I would say, versatile and eccentric art can be. So you mean to tell me that the artwork in itself, of course, it was the performance of creating the sausages made of the artist's blood.
Yes.
Are these sausages like also being preserved?
There are 2 that hang throughout the exhibition. So the performance is only for the opening night.
Right.
But for the entire run of the show, which might be 2 weeks, which might be 3 months, they have 2 sausages in the fridge for people to see.
I see.
Yeah, and then there's video of how it's being made, and there's also photos on the side.
I see. And is this something that still is existing to this day?
Yes. So the physical sausages are destroyed after the show ends, because it's a biohazard to keep.
Okay.
But the video stays in a collection and the photos stay in a collection.
Okay.
And the work can't be activated without the artists. Now, the artists, after making this work, became vegetarian, which is funny.
Oh.
And they've been performing it less and less since they've been getting older, and it's been more difficult to draw blood. So this is another one of the works that we're thinking about. What's the future of this?
Right.
Do we one day display this without its performance aspects? It's like conversations that need to be had with the artist.
Right. Wait, so you mean to tell me that this was performed more than once?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's, I think, at least 4 times now.
That's so interesting. That's so... Wow.
Yeah.
Can you just give us a little... For all the listeners who might be a little bit curious about this artwork, can you give us a little insight or background as to why they decided to do their self-portraits this way, or what message they were trying to put out?
I think it's not completely radical in the UK. It's, of course, like, might throw us off a little bit, but I feel like using different parts of your body for self-portraiture, people have used blood, people have used all these things through the years. So it's finding a way to express themselves through the physical expression of their blood.
Okay.
Is really interesting. So it's just a thing that we love, we accept.
Yeah.
It's a little interesting to smell the sausages being cooked during the performance.
Oh.
But it's something that we add to our documentation reports,
Right.
so that we can get the whole essence of the work.
Oh, that's I did not expect that answer, honestly. So that sounds like definitely something very interesting, but also very challenging. Now, It's wild to think actually that art now includes materials that weren't even meant to last. I mean, a sausage made of
Human blood.
Banana peel, cigarettes. How do you approach that? Do you preserve the physical object as much as possible, or is it more on documenting the artist's intent for the future?
A lot of the times you're trying to find a combination of all 3. Like, let's talk about the cigarettes for a little bit.
Okay.
The cigarettes that I'm working with, they're from this artist called Sarah Lucas, where she wraps artworks in cigarettes. Now, I'm looking at the cigarettes because they're browning, they're staining, they're ripping. And these were made in the 90s. These cigarettes don't exist anymore.
What?
So we're thinking about, we can replace them, but it's not the same cigarette. What does that mean? We're thinking about, is it ethical to replace them because you're supporting the tobacco industry? Right. And you're thinking about, what does Sarah Lucas think? Because she's alive and she has her gallery reach out, we're able to find that communication, we're able to find solutions. And it's all about talking and reaching out to people who know more than you.
Right.
Because in contemporary art, we're kind of generalists. Someone's always going to know more than us. We just have to figure out how to navigate what to do next.
Right. And that's so interesting because this was actually your dissertation, right?
Yes.
And I mean, I guess it's lucky that the artist was still alive, but how do you make these decisions when the artist no longer is with us?
You hope that the works are in museums that have acquired it and had these discussions with the artists. And if not, you have a big team of people to consult. The conservation community, we are very small. I know there's not a lot of people who do it here. There's not a lot of people who do it around the world. And it's kind of talking to who are the people who benefit and who rely on this, and who are the people who are the beneficiaries of this.
Right.
Who has to say from the museum, from the artist's estate, from the collection, and figuring out the best solution between us. So it's a big collaborative field, and I love it because I love talking to people. So it's just navigating all these relationships.
Wow, there's just so much work that goes into conserving art that, for example, a regular person who goes to a museum or to an art show would not even think about. You just go there and you appreciate the art. Some people don't even. Some people just take photos with it. And then, you listen to this and you realize there's just so much work that goes on behind the scenes, and it kind of forces you to appreciate the art even more.
Yeah.
Now, for the people who are listening who might not know, what's the process actually like? What does the process of conserving an artwork actually look like from the first examination to the treatment itself?
So usually an artwork will come into a collection. Say I'm working at the museum. It'll come into a collection and I do a condition check where I write down everything I notice about it. If there's a crack, if there's a splinter, if there's yellowing, everything I can notice from the outside. And then we do all the research. We talk to the artists, see what they want, especially if the art was made for an exhibition in that museum. You have more communication with the artist. And then you work with your art technicians and you figure out how are we going to store this if it's not going on display. And if it is going on display, how long can we store it? Because UV light is bad for artworks. For a majority of the artworks, plastic is sensitive to light. Paint, pigment sensitive to light. So you have to make a plan for storage and you have to make a plan for display. Now, if it's damaged, then you have to come up with plans for treatments. I always say conservation is at least 80% planning and research and 20% actual treatments, because you want to put the work in a great environment where it will thrive, so you don't have to worry about damage.
Right.
And when it does eventually happen, you have your, you know what it's made of and you know what you're going to do.
Right.
And you just essentially keep doing that. When you send it out for loan, you make sure it's okay. When it comes back, you monitor it again. It's like we are caretakers of these works.
Art. Yeah. Wow. And do you use a lot of advanced technology now, like imaging, 3D scanning, or chemical analysis, or is it still largely a hands-on craft?
I think, we conservators, we rely on heritage scientists to help us a lot with the more machine science-based stuff. We did learn a lot about it in our course, and I was able to use it for a couple of treatments while I was in Scotland. For example, this artwork the paint had come off the sculpture. It's weathered, it's been outdoors. So paint samples were removed from it before it was cleaned. And then I was able to use a colorimetry gun, which tells you what exactly this color is. So we can find paint that matches.
Whoa!
And when I look at the cigarettes, I'm able to put it in an FTIR machine, which essentially shoots radiation through the object and tells me what the object is made of, chemically. So I'm able to say, the filter is actually cellulose acetate, and the tobacco is this kind of tobacco. And I know how to do the basics, but for the more extreme stuff, we love our heritage scientists. And it's such a collaborative field that you're very grateful to have these people with chemistry degrees who know so much better and so much more than us.
Right. Wow, that's so cool. I mean, like I said earlier, you're part artist, you're part historian, I guess. You're also part scientist. You're wearing many hats in this field. But beyond the technical side, there's also an ethical one. Like I said earlier, how do you decide when to intervene and when to let the natural decay or transformation of a work be part of the story? I mean, if, for example, the material starts deteriorating faster than expected, do you preserve the look it once had or let it show its age? Again, I know you mentioned earlier that this depends on the artist's intent, but what normally is the consensus there?
It's very much, as I said, case to case. So the first thing is you have to make sure you have all the pictures and documentations of what it used to look like. And then you have your conversations. If it's getting to a place where it's unsafe to be out, so if we have one of the cigarette works I was working on, if it's ripped on the side and the tobacco's coming out, it's dangerous because if someone goes near it or touches it, it's more fragile,
Right.
and that is dangerous for the artwork. When it comes to that point where maybe it shouldn't be put on display or it's too decayed to be out, then you have the decision to, am I going to treat this or am I going to find a different way to keep this? Museums don't really like deaccessioning their artwork, so we'd like to keep them alive and viewed for as many people as possible. But again, it's that negotiation that we
Right.
have with our artists.
Right. And you did mention that not all artworks are safe for display, or not all of them go on display.
Yeah.
Right? Some of them are just being kept. How do museums or art shows make that decision aside from the safety factor?
Yeah, it's hard because, I mean, what you see on display in like any museum is maybe 1% of their entire collection.
Wow.
Storehouses for artworks are massive. So we had this one work by the artist Carla Black while I was in Scotland called Contact Isn't Lost. Now, this artwork was made in the gallery. So it's these like plastic, almost cellophane sheets with chalk and some paint and plaster
Right.
made in the gallery where it was made, and then it was stored after the show in 2009, and it hadn't been seen and opened since. And then we went there in 2024, and they were like, we don't know what it's going to look like because if there's no space to display it, what's going to happen? We can't be opening these boxes because then you'd be introducing more light, you'd be introducing more things where it's very safe in storage.
Right.
So this was a 50-50 Hail Mary, whether it's completely disintegrated or it's intact.
Right.
And fingers crossed, when we opened it, it was good as new, very little damage, but you don't know how plastic's going to degrade, especially when you chemically don't know what that's made of.
Right.
So it's kind of like Schrodinger's cat, where it's like, I don't know what this is going to look like. You hope for the best, and when you need it, that's when you open it up.
Right.
But you're not checking on it constantly because there's not enough people.
Yeah. And also, like you mentioned, the exposure to,
Yeah, you don't want to be moving around these
Yeah.
big works.
yeah, it's already stored as it should be, so why mess that up?
Exactly.
Ooh. Oh man. There's so much that goes into it. So many things to consider. So it really is like you are, as I've been saying earlier, part scientist, you're part artist, you're part detective, part historian. How much creativity is involved in your work though as a conservator? Because I know for a fact Catherine did take up fine arts in UP. She was an artist herself. You guys should see her artwork. So good. But now your art, the creativity is the creative energy rather is it's more focused, or you're putting more of your creative energy into conserving the artwork of others. So like I asked earlier, how much creativity is involved in your work as a conservator?
I don't think creativity is what we need because, well, creativity in terms of problem solving, but
Right.
creativity artistically is maybe bad for conservation because you want to be able to replicate what the artist has made.
Right.
So let's use my cigarettes, for example. Does everyone know what a cigarette looks like? There's the little butt at the bottom that's usually brown.
Right.
Now, the artwork was covered in these cigarettes with a brown butt, but that brown butt doesn't exist anymore because Marlboro lights are no longer being made. They're called Marlboro Golds.
Oh.
So my artistic skill comes in where I have to scan the old one, make a replica, and be able to hand paint what that old one used to look like. But I can't necessarily be creative and add like a little sparkle. or something.
Yeah.
I'm trying to go for the exact thing that's being done. And like I've repainted sculptures that needed to be repainted, but it has to be done to the same level that was previously done in. So it's not really creative. It's being able to imitate almost.
Right. And how does that feel for you? For someone who was a creative yourself, do you ever think like, ooh, maybe if I added a little shadow here, it would look a little bit better? How does it feel? Don't you feel a bit like held back with your creativity? And how do you let your creative juices flow when you're in a field where your main goal is to imitate the artwork of other artists?
I think my creativity comes more in my problem solving, which is fun. So I had this silver work by the artist Katie Patterson. And when you think of cleaning silver, right, you think of using like metal polish that we have at home for cleaning silverware, but that's so abrasive. So I had to get creative and think, what is essentially in metal polish that's less abrasive, and it's chalk. So I use lower calcium carbonate, which is chalk, with some water and some alcohol, and that's my DIY solution that does so much less damage to the work, and it's better for the work and easier for conservators to do. So it's not like I get to make beautiful paintings, but I get to problem solve, which is so much fun for me.
Okay. Yeah, and that also does take a different type of creativity, I would say. Now, we have a question actually from one of our viewers.
Oh, okay.
So Job is asking, what progress has been made in Philippine art conservation, or what's something that we can already apply within our capabilities that you've learned that you feel hasn't been done here yet?
I think in terms of Philippine conservation, I know a few of the conservators in the country, and they're great, but we're really focused on paintings here, and I think we have such beautiful sculptures. I know there are plans eventually for maybe a conservation program to be put up in the next couple of years in this country, but that's still in the works. But yeah, I think there's so much we can do for our sculptures in this country that's not really being done.
Okay.
And I think there are really easy solutions to doing that. If anyone wants to do sculpture conservation, reach out to me.
There you go.
Let's have a talk.
I mean, you never know, right? Like, there
Yeah.
might be people who are interested in conserving art that just don't know where to start.
Yeah.
So that would be really interesting. Now, are there any rules or ethical frameworks that you guys follow, especially when an artist's intent is ambiguous or impossible to confirm?
I think we have a couple of rules from all our different organizations in conservation. One of the main ones that's always stuck with me has been that all your treatments have to be reversible. So that means if you're applying something, you have to be able to take it out and not cause any more damage than you already are. So sometimes I see sculptures that are put together with super glue, but guess what? You can't take out super
Right.
glue. So you're breaking it more when you try to remove that piece. So it's always thinking about, okay, I think this is the best procedure and thing to do treatment-wise at this time, but what if in the future they come up with something better? How do they undo this?
Right.
So reversibility is a really big one.
Oh, that's so interesting. You would think that, I mean, from somebody who doesn't do conservation, right?
Yeah.
You would think it's more like permanence. How do you make sure that this remains the same way as is? But it's so interesting to get that perspective that you also have to think about how can you undo it in case it needs to be done.
Yeah, because what we know now is so much more than what we knew 3 years ago.
Right.
And in another 3 years, technology is going to be even better. So how do we make sure that these artworks are stable, but also ready for if there's something better that comes along and someone else can do even more?
Oh, amazing. And I have to ask, what is one material or art form that you think will be the biggest conservation challenge in the next 50 years?
Ooh, I think it's already one of the biggest conservation challenge, and that's why there's so many maybe PhDs popping around it, but plastics.
Oh.
Because plastics were made like 100 years ago, and plastics are now manufactured by individual people, right? That's companies that are making it. So we don't know their recipes, and we don't know how it's gonna evolve. Some plastics, they are autocatalytic, which means I'll explain. Which means when they start to degrade, it'll never stop. There's nothing you can do about it. You put it in a box and you hope it doesn't affect anything else. Some plastics, they off-gas, which means that they'll affect anything else in the box. Some plastics yellow, some plastics shrink. There's this amazing plastics guide that we refer to, which is a very niche, special thing that we have in contemporary conservation, plastic identification tool. That's kind of like this toolbox that helps us figure out what is this plastic based on other plastic things.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, look around us right now. Everything's
Oh my God.
plastic.
Yeah.
Your earphones are plastic.
I thought you were going to say your plastic.
We're on the radio. You just have to think about how present plastic is in our lives, and we don't know what's going to happen to it. And so we have these researchers looking into how it's going to degrade and how it's going to be kept and all these things. And I think it's a current problem now, and we're very aware of it. And we just have to think about how it's going to be a problem in the future.
I mean, I think that's really cool because as, again, someone who's not in the field, right, you would think plastic's plastic. You think that, for example, from when you hear the environmental standpoint, they're like, plastic is killing the environment. Plastic doesn't, what do you call it? Like, it doesn't die. Or,
Yeah.
it doesn't
Degrade.
degrade. So hearing that there's so many different possibilities and ways that it could evolve sort of in the in the future, especially in art, I think is interesting. Now, can you, I mean, I can't think of an artwork right now that's like plastic. Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so during my course, I was lucky enough to be in this module where we talked to the V&A, which is the Victoria and Albert Museum, about kind of the problems they had with some works and like problem solving, things like that, because it's a very collaborative field. And I was assigned, it's called The Liberator by Cody Wilson and Defense Distributed 2013, which was essentially a 3D printed gun, the first ever 3D printed gun. It was posted online and obviously taken down right away. And then the V&A acquired the rights to its blueprint, so it can't be mass produced because obviously that's dangerous.
Wait, so this is an actual...
It's an actual shooting gun.
Working, like, what?
And yeah, if you look at it, you look at it now, different parts of it are aging in different ways because 3D printing technology, which is so present now, is always evolving. There's like 3 major ways right now. Each of them uses a different kind of plastic. The different kind of ways that it's like constructed, whether it's pushed, it's molded or whatever, will determine how it falls apart and things like that. And so you have to think about how it's 3D printed. You have to collect the blueprints. When you collect the blueprints, you have to make sure the kind of printing technology is still available.
Right.
And it's just such a fast-moving like field because it's pushed by industry. Conservation and art isn't the major pusher for 3D printed things. It's industry.
Right.
So you just have to work with what you find.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's actually...
It's jarring.
Yeah, it is. Now, we are going to get into it a little bit more, but right now, Monsters, you are listening to Heard on Thursdays. I'm your host, Ria Rams, and we are here with art conservator Catherine Campos talking about the delicate and fascinating world of keeping contemporary art alive. We'll be back after a short break, only here on Manila's hottest, Monster RX93.1.
The Monster presents Heard on Thursdays, the iconic radio talk show that made Philippine FM radio talk. Winner of multiple KBP Golden Dove Awards. HOT. Heard on Thursdays. Your host, Ria Rams.
Heard on Thursdays. I'm your host, Ria Rams, and we are here with stylist we are here with art conservator Catherine Campos, okay? And let's zoom out a little bit.
Okay.
So for people who might be wondering, why is art conservation so important, especially for contemporary works that might feel more experimental or fleeting?
I think conservation is really important because I think about access. You think about the first time a work is shown. It's in a museum or it's in a gallery that maybe is in a different continent from us. We can't travel there. But if you are able to keep the piece alive maybe for long enough that more people can see it, it just gives them better access. And that's something I'm a massive fan of in conservation, is that we are keeping these artworks alive for you to see them.
Right.
We're taking care of it for you to see them. We're thinking about the future generations, but we're mostly thinking about you.
Right. And why do you think art, for example, it's so important to conserve and to have more people in future generations see these arts, especially the contemporary pieces that artists are creating in our generation?
I think art is such an amazing mirror and reflection of society today. You see the way that artwork is made after World War II is a direct reaction of all the like pain and the scarcity that is felt. You see artwork that's being made in the Philippines now as like a response to corruption and all the inequality we see in the country. Art to some people is just like frilly, beautiful nonsense, but to a lot of people, it's a reflection of the people and the economy and everything that's happening right now. And I think this is so important, so we remember what's happening in the world now and maybe learn from it, hopefully.
Yeah, and I really do hope that our listeners who are tuned in right now have a deeper appreciation of art after listening to this. I feel like there have been viral videos of people seen in museums using artwork as backgrounds to their Instagram or TikTok posts, right? But I really do hope that everybody realizes that art is so much more than aesthetic.
Yeah.
It's, like you said, a mirror and a reflection of the society that the art was created in. Now, do you ever encounter people who question whether certain materials or installations are even worth preserving? How do you respond to that?
I think I had a lot of questions kind of like that when I said I was doing my cigarette-based works. Because my artist, Sarah Lucas, she does these amazing works with like tights that resemble bunnies and all these other materials. I think her cigarette works aren't quite as big in terms of like collecting power. So I've had people say, so why are you doing the cigarette ones when like that's not the most famous ones? But I think that the cigarette ones were a reflection of the time. When Sarah Lucas talks about her experience with cigarettes being from the UK lower class in the like 70s, cigarettes are so ingrained in that culture. And for you to think that just because it's not as famous, I'm not going to work on it,
Right.
completely erases such a big like majority of people who experience hardships and who use cigarettes as meals and things like that.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. That's such a beautiful way to see it. I mean, it really gives you perspective on, this isn't just about material or how much people are willing to spend on it, on seeing it or collecting it, but it's really just about being able to preserve not only the artwork but the history and the story that comes along with it. Now, how does conservation help us understand time and culture that an artwork comes from, especially now, like when contemporary art reflects social issues, identity, or even climate change?
I think that's interesting because I've been talking a lot about objects that I've been working on, but I also do conservation of media. And so there are some media works I work on. For example, Alana Kelly, Chant Down the Grantham, which is a work about these women. They did a protest at this place called Grantham Commons because they were trying to build like nuclear facilities in Ireland, and they did peaceful protests to make sure this didn't happen. And this went on for a long time. And what the artist did is she recorded her and some other women at the protest keening, which is an Irish throat sound almost, that's done in times of mourning.
Okay.
And I think her doing that audio art at that time really reflects what was available for her to discuss what was happening, what she was being impacted by. And you kind of see that in conserving this work that's audio art. I mean, in the future now, we can do like live streams, we can do software, we can do all these things. But this is a product of the time of what was accessible via tape recorder. And for me to conserve that and digitize it and keep it just keeps the like authenticity of the time as well, and really like what they were going through and the medias in which it was created in.
Yes. And how does it we do have the technology now to preserve that kind of media, right? But was it difficult to preserve? Because it's been ages, right? It's been a while since tape recorders were a thing, and nowadays it's hard to even find these mediums. So how did you go about conserving something so dated?
Yeah, so I was given the digital copy for this work, but I was also really lucky that because I was living in London at the time, I was able to go to some screenings of the artist. The screenings had the audio playing on loop, but I could notice that was a completely different sound because there were more airplanes in the background.
Oh.
So I essentially have to sit with the piece and listen to it like a million times until I memorize what's going on, so I can tell what's happening. And when I talk to the artist, it's because there were many different versions of the piece that was made, so different museums could have it. Because now maybe we can burn a CD or we
Right.
can make a duplicate or whatever, but back in the day,
Right.
it's a new tape, it's a different recorder. Even though it's still counted and documented as the same work, it's a different thing.
Whoa.
Yeah, so you see the nuances really
Right.
when you're working with somewhat older art.
And what do those nuances make any difference in the artwork or in the story that's being told?
From my experience, yeah, it was the one I watched in the screening was much more violent almost because it had all those choppers and those war sounds. And in the digitized copy I had from another museum, it was much clearer where you could hear the women, the strife, the suffering that they were enduring. And so you're getting a completely different message almost from both
Right.
of them under the guise of the same artwork.
Now, wow, I also do love that your artwork touches on collaborations like you mentioned with artists, scientists, even engineers. Can you share what that teamwork looks like and how do these different worlds come together to save one piece of art?
I think, yeah, when we think about, I will be in a team of conservators. If I'm lucky to be in an institution that has conservation scientists, they're here helping me on the side. We also work with the curators because the curators are who brings artworks into the museum and they're also who kind of decide what gets put on display. A lot of the times when we're thinking about artwork and its space it's in, we get to consult the communities, which I think is really powerful. This is, again, London history, but for the Olympics, they tore down a bunch of these buildings and like maybe lower income households to build the strip where the Olympics was done, which classic gentrification, right?
Yes.
But there was this artwork made from the bricks that were taken from the space because the artist and his family were pushed out of that during the time. So there's consultation with the communities who were affected. There's consultation with the families who were there, where the building's going to be. And I think it's really important to think about the stakeholders as well, because it's just as important because these are the eyes on the work. These
Right.
are the people who can relate to the
Right.
work.
It's really more than just collaboration but also connection.
Yeah. You have to make sure that this artwork is at its best, and at its best it is put on display with the most sensitivity for who's going to view it.
Oh.
So it's just a lot of emails and a lot of consultations and a lot of meetings, but eventually you get to a place where you can meet everyone's needs most of the time, and I think that's so fulfilling.
I'm sure. I mean, I think with art, it's not just making sure it looks good, but making sure that the message that you're putting out is as authentic and accurate as it should be.
Yeah.
Now, on a personal level, Catherine, how has working so closely with art changed the way that you experience it? Like, when you walk into a museum now, I'm sure before, for somebody who hasn't worked, of course, with art, you look at it and you're like, oh, it's so pretty, and you're trying to guess what the message is, right? As somebody who goes to museums. But how about you? What do you see that most people might miss when you go into a museum? Are you still able to enjoy it like with the lens of somebody who's not a conservator, or are you kind of like, they could have done this, this is how they conserve this? Tell us about it.
I think how I look at art has changed so much as I have like grown in my experience with art. So when I was doing painting, I would like be so close to the work, I would zoom in and see the brush strokes. And then when I was doing art history, I would spend all my time reading every single plaque at the museum. Now I look a little weird when I walk into museums because I look on the floor, I look for the pest traps. These are little like triangular boxes. You probably don't know this, but that's where they catch the pests. Then a preventive conservator will take that home and study what kind of bugs do we have in the museum and how do we get rid of them. I'm also looking at the lights because our UV, as I said, is really dangerous for our artworks. If I could, I would bring a humidity monitor and see what the levels are in the museum. I'm looking how it's hung, how it's displayed, how things are placed next to each other. If the glass has UV protection, I'm trying to see.
Uh-huh.
So I look much weirder now than I did during my last 2 degrees. I almost look like I'm inspecting the space.
Yeah.
Because I kind of am.
Yeah.
Because it's so important to me.
Right. That is actually so interesting because I'm curious now. You did mention about how the artworks are placed next to each other. Does that also come into play when conservators try to think about how art could be preserved when they're being displayed?
Yeah, we have to think about what's sensitive to light. So maybe this object here can only have this brightness of light, which is really high. And then an object here needs to have really low light, like photography or something.
Right.
So you have to make sure they're in completely different spaces or only one is hit by a spotlight. You're also thinking of plastics that if they off-gas, they can affect everything else in the box. So it's kind of, you have to know the science and the condition of everything you're putting on display and have a chat with the curators about it.
Wow, I'm so that's so interesting. I am trying to think back at all the museums I've visited, and then because there are a lot of very large museums with many different floors, and I always thought it was just okay, this artist goes here, this artist goes there, paintings are here, sculptures are there. I didn't even think that it could be because of other factors besides the kind of work or the artist. That is so interesting. Now, for regular museum goers, what is something that you wish more people understood about the work behind keeping an artwork on display looking the way that it does?
My number one thing is please don't touch the artwork. Everywhere I go, like in the Philippines, abroad, anywhere, we are such haptic, tactile beings, and we love to touch things. But when you touch things, you start to wear down the pigments and the layers and things like that, which just gives someone like me more to do. If the museum's lucky enough to have a conservator, we don't have too many of those for objects and things. So my number one thing is please look with your eyes and not with your hands. Please.
Yeah. Yeah. And don't use the artworks as phone stands.
Oh yeah, you can take selfies, honestly, I don't care.
No flash.
No flash, no flash. We know light is bad. Don't bring your liquids near it. Don't touch it. But yeah, other than that, there's no correct way to enjoy art.
Yeah.
Just don't touch it.
I love that. I love that. You have to say it again. There is no correct way to enjoy art.
Yeah, I think it really isolates people to say, oh, when you look at art, you need to look at it with your eyes and stare from a distance, and you can't take pictures, because why is there a rule book on how to appreciate art? You appreciate how you want to.
Yes.
Just don't touch it.
No, I love that because normally I wouldn't say normally, but there are artists who are quite snobby when it comes to appreciating art. But to hear from somebody who's worked with art in so many different degrees, from painting it to studying the history to conserving it, to hear that from somebody who's intimately connected to art, say there's no right way to appreciate art, is just so beautiful.
Yeah.
So profound, I would say. I love that. Now, we are going to talk a little bit more about that, but Monsters, right now, you are listening to Heard on Thursdays with me, Rhea Rams, and today we are talking about conservation, creativity, and care with contemporary art conservator Catherine Campos. We are going to be right back after this short break, only here on Manila's hottest Monster RX93.1.
Slay.
Monster presents Heard on Thursdays, the iconic radio talk show that made Philippine FM radio talk. Winner of multiple KBP Golden Dove Awards. HOT. Heard on Thursdays. Your host, Rhea Rams.
And welcome back to Heard on Thursdays. I'm your host, Rhea Rams, and we are here today with contemporary art conservator Catherine Campos. We are talking about, of course, taking care of contemporary modern art. Now, the art world is changing so quickly. We've got digital art. I mean, there are NFTs, even AI-generated pieces now. Yeah. First of all, before we ask about the conservation of that, I need to know, from an artist's perspective, your thoughts on AI-generated art. Because some people actually consider this art, right?
Yeah.
But from an artist's perspective...
You see, I'm going to sound like an old woman here, where I'm like, AI.
Robophobic. You're robophobic.
I think AI has great implications for, like, medical fields and stuff like that. But I feel like when you start making art with AI, it just gets so flat. Like, personally, this is my take. Don't hate me, AI artists. But, like, people work for years and for decades to hone their crafts and art, and then you can type in GPT. Sorry, obviously not the user. You can type in Chat GPT that create this artwork and it's done. And I think it's discouraging for a lot of artists who have worked so hard to get where they are.
Agreed. I mean, I feel the creative field is... There's like a lot to discuss when it comes to the creative. I mean, people are even making songs now with AI.
I didn't know that.
And then there are also influencers that are AI.
That they're like...
As in, they're influencers.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and there were issues recently with brands, like human brands, like makeup, skincare, collaborating with these AI influencers.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I guess it's the same with any creative field. So art, of course, like you did mention, people work on this for years, honing their craft, only for you to type in something and have this
generated. So yeah, personally, I'm not a fan. Is my politically correct stance
right
on that. I have much stronger feelings when we're not live.
Yeah, off air, we can
have a chat.
Remove the filter.
Yeah.
Now, but when it comes to the conservation of these kinds of arts, like digital art, for example, there's a lot going on now. Like, I mean, I would say animated movies, right?
Performance art,
just digital art. NFTs. What does conservation look like in that future? How do you preserve something that is born in a digital space?
Born digital is a big field. So my field, obviously, my master's covered it. I maybe was more objects inclined, but then I did get to work on it a little bit. I think one of the big maybe issues or things I had a big think about was, how are we storing this? Because storage takes up space, which takes up water, which also, like, as much as you want to save a high-res video of every single thing you've ever recorded, that takes up so much space, which uses so much water. So is that also ethical to keep it to that level? Now, I was lucky enough to work on a project for the National Portrait Gallery where it's a 1969 film, but I had to digitize it to become like a media film. And I had to figure out what was the best way to save it or to have it stored for and transcode for display, for keeping in storage, and for viewing copies for researchers.
Right.
Because as much as I want to make a digital copy of everything under the sun, that takes up so much space from the museum, which takes up so much space on whatever cloud they're using, which is also not the most ethical.
Right.
So I think that's a big dilemma now we have. We're understanding the technology, we're understanding emulating things, but it's just, where do we put everything?
Right.
It's a big one now.
Oh, so it's something that is still current, like in the process of being resolved?
Well, different people, and we have like amazing brains in the field of conservation, are coming up with different solutions. So obviously it would depend on the institution and the place. but we're all trying to figure out what is the best and most ethical thing to do.
Right.
And I think it's great that we're always thinking about it because that means we're always problem solving.
Right. That's great. Now, you've also worked across different countries, the Philippines, the UK, Scotland. Now, what do you think the Philippines can learn from how other countries approach conservation? And on the flip side, what unique perspectives can Filipino conservators bring to the table?
I think this is fun because in the Philippines, I mean, our conservation, I think USD has book and archive conservation, but we're not really looking at like things like what I do, right? So what we can learn from them is how they're doing it, and how to set up our own programs and things like that for us to be able to do it here. Because if something modern or contemporary goes wrong, who are you sending it to? Are you sending it to Hong Kong? Are you sending it to Europe? What's happening? And I think one thing you need to think of when you're in the UK, which is, I mean, it's essentially where my field was born, and so it's some of the most advanced and technologically advanced places for conservation, is how do we do this in a museum that doesn't have the same funding as us?
Right.
And it's really good. The global conservation community has a lot of collaborations and conferences with different countries. Latin America has some amazing conservation programs that have maybe the amount of funding we might have one day, that they come up with fixes and stuff that don't need millions of pesos in one machine or millions of pesos in this funding. And I think we can learn from having so much what we can do here, and we can learn from having so little what we can do to make art more accessible and conservation so accessible. Because we can say it's the best field ever, right? Which I personally think it is. But how is it the best field ever if we can't do it here?
Right.
We have to find a way to find the middle where we can do both.
Right. Now, I'm curious, Catherine, when it comes to, because you did mention, right, like when we're trying to conserve Philippine art, where do we send it? Is it super important, or does it play a big factor that the conservator is of the same culture as the artist?
Right now, the way conservation's headed, that it's so ethical and sensitive to the needs of the artist, I think now, no. Maybe back in the day when we didn't know as much and we weren't as aware of how important that is. But I think now, like, I won't do any better for a Filipino artist than I would do for an English artist. I think it's important we have boots on the ground here so that we can work on the artworks here and we don't have to send it somewhere else. But I don't think that my ethnicity will change how I treat an artwork.
Do you think that that's just you, or is that the general mindset of all conservators?
I think that's the general mindset for contemporary conservation.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
That is very good to hear. Now, if you could design a dream conservation lab or initiative for the Philippines, something to protect our own contemporary art for future generations, what would it look like?
Okay, so obviously I'd have to put it in UP because that's my alma mater, right? And I would want a massive first floor, because I think a lot of conservation labs don't realize that if you put your sculptures on the second floor, it's too heavy, and that becomes a secondary problem. We have these beautiful abuevas and like Emaus around UP. We want to find a way to get these big stone sculptures into a covered area so we can work on it. So I think a really big ground floor space with scaffolding and everything. And then for more sensitive things, I think we should have a second floor. Now, the most important thing is this needs to be aircon.
Okay.
And relative humidity has to be stable. So I think if we can get a big box with really good conditions, we should be set, because we have the talent here. We just need the space and the equipment to be able to do this.
Right. So the aircon.
Yeah, big fan of aircon.
Yeah, has to be running like 24/7, huh?
Yeah, because it's too humid in this country.
Right. But in other countries, like those that are colder, they
have heating.
They have heating.
Because you want to keep it at a certain temperature for certain works.
Oh. Wow, it seems so complicated.
Yeah, you wouldn't think aircon would be such a big thing.
Right.
But yeah.
That's so interesting. Now, and for those who are listening who love art but might not be experts, what can we do, even in small ways, to help care for and preserve the art around us? You did mention no touching in museums, but is there anything else?
I think just no touching in general. The Philippines, I think we're quite lucky that we have a few outdoor sculptures every now and then. If you walk around like UP, You have so many beautiful sculptures everywhere. I think if we treat that like we would treat an object in a museum, we just treat all public art with respect, then we can have it in good condition for so much longer. I mean, why wouldn't you want to see the same artwork in 10 years pristine and not like vandalized or anything?
Right.
And also more funding in the arts.
Yes.
Period.
And Catherine, after everything you've seen and studied, from sculptures to performances to materials that are meant to fade, what does keeping art alive mean to you?
Ooh, okay. That's hard. I think keeping art alive just means that we are keeping the artwork in its best possible condition for as many people to see it. Because it's my goal that, like, if you can't see this artwork in this museum, maybe if I care for it so much, one day it gets loaned to some museum closer to you and you can see it. Because I think, okay, artwork in photos is so beautiful, and we're so lucky we have the internet. Because if this was 50 years ago, I would never be able to see a show that's in Paris, but now I can open TikTok and it's there, right?
Right.
But I want everyone to maybe have the opportunity and keep these works alive for so long that you can maybe see it one day also.
In person.
Yeah,
It's different.
It's so different. There's just so much to an artwork that's round and not just two-dimensional that you can keep in a photo.
Exactly. Oh, that's beautiful. And also, I want to ask, you have experienced so much art in very many degrees, as we mentioned earlier. How would you define art?
Oh, okay. This is, I think I wrote a paper about this maybe 10 years ago, and I don't remember what I wrote because it was 10 years ago. But I think art is, if I don't answer this well, my professors are going to kill me. I think art is an expression, either of yourself or of what's around you. Period. I just think art is an experience, an expression, and art is something that is so unique to the maker and the situation that they're in, that there's so few words that can fully describe an artwork and do it justice. And so I think art is something you need to experience, and that's why I'm doing conservation. So maybe we can all experience these works for as long as possible.
Right. And for those people who love art but might not work in museums or aren't as exposed, what is one small thing that they can do to support conservation or help keep creative heritage alive?
I think just think about art and care about art. Like, I don't care if you hate this sculpture or whatever, but if you have an opinion, it means you care. And I think by saying, oh, art is this fancy thing, it really isolates so many people from it, where I think if we just cared more about art, there would be more interest, there would be more funding. If people cared more and felt like they had the space to express how they felt, and it's not just this like first-class field that they don't have the right to talk about, I think we'd be in such a better place artistically if we just cared a little more about art.
Right. And what would you say to those people who do think that way, who think that, art is this snobby, like, rich person thing?
I mean, I understand how that happened because, I mean, how much does it cost to get into an art fair these days? There are some free spaces around Manila, but, like, the pinnacle of art are these expensive spaces we need to pay for. And so I do understand where that's coming from, and I do almost plead with these museums and these institutions to make your art accessible. If you want people to care about art, you have to be able to reach them. And financially is a big hindrance for a lot of people.
Right. Oh, man. Now, I think it really is something that we need to understand and care more about. And I do hope that the people who have the authority to make it more accessible to other people do something about it. Yeah. Now, lastly, you did mention earlier that if there's anybody who's interested in conservation of sculptures, was that you mentioned?
Yeah, or anything contemporary, honestly, let's have a chat.
Yeah, let's have a chat. So where can people follow your work or learn more about what you do, or where can they get in touch with you?
So I don't have a conservation Instagram because I just post stuff on my main Instagram. But my Instagram is cathcamp with CAATHCAMP. And I mean, I used to teach, so I love getting questions in my inbox. So honestly, hit me up. I've had some people on like Reddit reach out to me asking what units they need to take for this to happen. Honestly, I feel like a lot of universities all around are changing their requirements and stuff. So I don't have a science background. So don't be intimidated by that, because I think that's the biggest one for conservation. So reach out to me and let's discuss.
I love that. So again, Monsters, if you want to learn more about conservation or just art in general, or maybe you're interested in getting into the field, message Catherine. That's at CAATHCAMP. Okay, Monsters? Catherine, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your passion with us here on The Monster. This conversation is it was so insightful. I learned so much, our listeners learned so much, and it's a reminder that art isn't static. It's living, it's changing, and it's so deeply human. It's so connected in so many ways. Now, once again, Monsters, this has been Heard on Thursdays with me, Ria Rams. Now, before I let you go, Catherine, is there anybody that you want to say hi to?
Hi to my parents. Thanks for letting me do this program in London. I love you.
Oh. Now, once again, Monsters, today we talked about what it takes to conserve the contemporary with art conservator Catherine Campos. Catch us again next week. Same time, same place, only here on Manila's hottest, Monster RX93.1.
Monster exclusive interview. Monster exclusive interview. Only from Manila's hottest. Monster RX93.1.